Hi there guys, and welcome to another video. So what I thought we'd talk about today is different ways we can make our Unraid server sleep and different ways we can then wake the server from that sleep state. Now the most obvious reason we might want our server to go to sleep in the first place, well, is to save power. So for example, if you had your server sleep for 8 hours a day while you're asleep, well that's 33% of the day, and so it will save you 33% to run the server. There are other reasons you might want your server to go to sleep. Other reasons I can think of, well, if your server happens to be in the same room where you sleep, or you can hear it from where you sleep, well, if the server goes to sleep as well, you're not going to hear those noisy fans. Well, another reason I guess is theoretically, it could make your components in the server last longer. While the server is sleeping, the components aren't really being used, it's in a low power state, the CPU's not going to be hot, the hard drives aren't going to be spinning up, so again, if it's asleep for 8 hours a day, your components possibly could last up to 33% longer. I don't know. If you guys can think of any other reasons why you might want to sleep the server, if you can, then please let us know in the comments below. Now there's various different ways to sleep and to wake your server, some that you might know and some that you may not know. Now I'm sure most of you watching, you know about the excellent Dynamics S3 Sleep plugin. And so what this great plugin does is it enables S3 Sleep on your Unraid server. Now don't worry, I'll explain what all the different types of sleep are, but on the main tab of your Unraid server at the bottom, when you've installed this plugin, underneath the reboot and shutdown buttons, you'll have another button which you can click on which will put the server to sleep. But also what this plugin will do is allow you to set on a schedule for your server to go to sleep or even shut down. And the great thing about it is there's various different conditions you can set that need to be met before it will do so. For instance, you can have it so there has to be very little disk activity, very little network activity, in fact a whole bunch of different conditions.
Can we have it so if something is on within our network, then the server will not shut down or sleep?
Yep, we can set that in the plugin as well. In fact, I've got an NVIDIA Shield, which I use to watch my NB server. So in the plugin, we can put in the IP address of the devices that we want to make sure that if they're on, then the server won't sleep or shut down. It's really useful.
So can the plugin also wake up the server at a certain time? I mean, like it shuts the server down at midnight, then wakes it at say 9 AM?
No, unfortunately the plugin's not able to do this. When you use the plugin, you have to manually start the server yourself. We can either do that by pressing the power button on the front of the server to wake it, or using something called Wake on LAN, which uses another computer on the network, or maybe your phone or something, that sends something called a magic packet that will wake the server up. And in the video, we'll be looking at how to set up Wake on LAN so it works on our servers.
Yeah, I can see you might not want it to auto-wake anyway. There is a cool feature on my Apple Mac called Wake or Start Up Your Mac. It's in the energy saver settings. You can set a specific time for your Mac to wake from sleep or start up. Is there nothing like that in Linux we could use on our Unraid servers?
Well, yep, actually there is a way to do this. There's a command in Linux called RTC Wake, and what this does is it sleeps the server for a certain amount of time, which you specify in the command. So you can tell the server to go to sleep from anything for a few seconds up to a few hours and then wake itself afterwards. And I'll be showing you a script that uses this, where you can set the time of day that you want the server to wake, and when you run the script it will sleep it until that time. So obviously this method is using the host operating system to wake the server, but we don't have to rely on the host operating system to do this. There's another way we can use a hardware-based system where we can set the time we want the server to wake up in the BIOS. Now this is normally called something like BIOS wake up or schedule power on, and it allows us to choose a time for the server to wake from either sleep or even a complete shutdown. Okay, right, let's move on now and talk about the different types of sleep. Now there's S0, S1, S2, S3, S4 and S5. Now I guarantee you've used S0 and S5 before, we all have. So basically S0 is the computer turned on and S5 is the computer turned off. So S0 is when the computer is normally functioning in its day-to-day use, and S5 is when it's shut down but still plugged into the wall and the PSU turned on. In the S5 state, there's just enough power to be able to register a button press on the front of your server or PC, or if you've enabled it in the motherboard, enough power going to the NIC to be able to receive a Wake on LAN magic packet. Now whether your computer or server can actually respond to a Wake on LAN packet in an S5 state basically depends on your motherboard and your network adapter. Not all hardware will support this, but more about that later. So as you can see here, the lower the number, the more power the server or computer uses, and the higher the number, the less power it uses. So now let's talk about the S1 and S2 sleep states. I'd call these more kind of legacy power states. They're not really used much in modern PCs. These sleep states were more commonly used in early computers back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. It was this time where the ACPI, or the Advanced Configuration and Power Interface standard, was being developed. Before this, we had older power management standards such as APM, Advanced Power Management, but the S1 and S2 sleep states were some of the first states in the more advanced ACPI standard. So in both S1 and S2 states, the CPU stops executing instructions, but the memory remains powered. And in S2, there's more components that are powered down than there is in S1. That's the basic difference between these two. So now from the mid 2000s to late 2000s, we didn't really see much of the S1 and S2. As technology got better and power management got better, we started seeing S3 and S4. Now with S3, which is probably the most common version of sleep, the CPU is not executing any instructions and the state of the system is all held in RAM. And pretty much most of all the other components, they're either off or in a very low power state. And S3 is the sleep state which is easiest to be able to wake using a Wake on LAN packet. More hardware will support this version than any other. And S3 sleep is often referred to as suspend to RAM. Now S4 sleep is slightly different. In the S4 state, the state of the computer is not held in the RAM, but it's written to disk. And then the RAM's powered down, saving more power. Now in Linux, generally the contents of the RAM are written to the swap partition. Now as you may know, in Unraid we don't have a swap partition, so we can't use S4 sleep. And another name for S4 sleep is suspend to disk. Now in fact that brings something else to mind. If you're running a VM on any hardware at all, whether it's Unraid, VirtualBox, whatever you may be using, there's never any point, and you should really disable any type of S4 or hibernation on a VM, because obviously writing its RAM contents to disk in the VM is not going to save any power at all because the host is still awake and the host is still operating normally. Anyway, a little off topic but interesting anyway. So obviously what we're going to be concentrating on is S3 suspend to RAM sleep. And the first thing we need to make sure is we've definitely got this enabled in our BIOS. Now obviously I can't show you how to do this for every motherboard, but basically you go into your BIOS, it will probably be F2 or delete, F12, you're going to need to press some key to get into the BIOS. Then once you're in the BIOS, you're going to want to head over probably to the Advanced tab. Then in the Advanced tab, we want to go down to ACPI configuration. And then here we can see I've got suspend to RAM. Now remember S3 sleep is suspend to RAM. So I've got the options for disabled or auto. So auto is going to allow me to have S3 sleep. Now on this motherboard I've also got the option here. If I wanted to have a PS2 keyboard be able to wake up the server from an S4 or S5 sleep, I could enable this here. But to be honest, this doesn't interest me at all, so I'm leaving mine on disabled. Now again, what I want to make sure is I have PCIe devices power on enabled. This will enable me to have Wake on LAN and be able to send a Wake on LAN ping to my Unraid server to wake it up over the network. And if we see here the RTC alarm power on, at the moment I've got it set by OS, so the OS can do this and wake up the machine. But if I put enabled here, then I can actually set a time of day where if the computer's off, it will automatically start, using the computer's RTC clock or real-time clock, and we just set the time and the computer will automatically boot if it's switched off. I don't want that, I'm going to leave mine by OS. And finally the last two things here, the two other devices that can trigger a wake up, USB keyboard and USB mouse. I'm leaving mine as disabled. So on your motherboard, just look for similar settings. It's probably going to be, like I said, in the ACPI configuration, and make sure to enable your S3 Sleep, and if you can, enable Wake on LAN. Okay, so the next thing to do is to install the S3 Sleep plugin onto our Unraid server. You can see here on this server, I don't have a sleep button, so I can't activate it from the GUI. So let's head across to the Apps tab and do a search for S3. And here we can see the Dynamics S3 Sleep plugin, so let's get that installed. So when that's done, we can click on Done, and now going back to the main tab, here we are at the bottom, we can put the server to sleep. Now I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go across to Settings here, and now at the bottom of the Settings page under User Utilities, we've got these sleep settings here. So let's click onto that, and we can see at the top here, we've got the function that this plugin can do. At the moment it's disabled, so it won't automatically do anything. But what we can do is we can choose to have it automatically sleep the server or automatically shut it down. I'm going to click onto Sleep here to automatically sleep the server. Now, what we've got here is excluded days. So if there are any days of the week where I didn't want this to happen, then I would set that there. So for instance, if I didn't want my server to sleep at the weekends, because I figure I might be watching movies or something, well, I could disable it from shutting down on a Saturday and Sunday. And the same here, excluded hours is when I don't want the sleep plugin to take effect. So the hours I don't want my server to shut down might be something like from 9 till midnight. So now in between 9 and midnight, my server's not going to either sleep or shut down. But during these hours here, if the underneath conditions are met, then it's going to go to sleep. But so long as it's not a Saturday or Sunday. Now the first thing is we can wait for array inactivity. So if the array's busy, it's not going to go to sleep. So this is useful if you don't want your server to sleep when it's in the middle busy doing something. Now for device activity monitoring, I recommend leaving it on status and counters. Now with this setting here, waiting for array inactivity, we can also do that with disks outside of the array with our unassigned disks. Here we can choose which disk we want outside of the array for it to be able to monitor as well. I personally don't want to do that, so I'm leaving mine as none. Now here, the extra delay after array inactivity, at the moment this is set for 30, which is 30 minutes. I'd probably set that a little bit less, maybe 15. And another trigger here we can set is to wait for the network to be inactive. So if we were to enable this to wait for the network to be inactive, I find this can be a bit hit and miss. But here we choose the network adapter that we want to listen on. You want to set that for your default network adapter, and here we choose the network idle threshold. So if we wanted to make sure there's absolutely no traffic on the network and it will only shut down if there's nothing, we'd use silent. And if we didn't care, we wanted high or mega traffic, then we can set it this way or anywhere in between. Personally, I leave this turned off. Now one thing I do like to do is I like to wait for host inactivity. Like I was saying earlier in the video, I've got an NVIDIA Shield that's on the network, and what this will do is it will ping the IP address that you put in here and check if it's online or not, and if it is online it won't shut down, and it will keep checking to see if it's shut down during the hours that your server can go to sleep. So if my NVIDIA Shield was on at say midnight, it's not going to go to sleep, and if it goes off at say 2 AM, well, it's going to go to sleep then. So I think that's a really useful function. And if you wanted to put two things in there, just comma separate the IP addresses, and you can have two different devices on the network that the plugin will wait to see whether they're active or not. Underneath here we can wait for user inactivity. We've got no, local, remote, and local and remote. Personally, I leave that to no. Now there's an important option here, set wake on LAN options before sleep. Now you want to leave this to be on G. If your network adapter isn't on G, then you're not going to be able to actually wake up the server with a wake on LAN ping, even though we've enabled it in the BIOS. The network adapter must be set to G if we want to be able to wake the server that way. Now I'm going to come back to this bit in a moment on another server, but here we can put in custom commands before sleep, And on some servers you can find that after waking up from sleep, your network adapter might not be in gigabit speed, so you can force gigabit after wake up by setting that to yes. Most modern hardware you don't really have to do that. And again here you can force the DHCP to be renewed. Maybe your router only gives out an IP address for say an hour, 2 hours, and your server might have been off for longer. In that case you'd want to set this to enable the DHCP renewal after the server wakes up. Okay, so I'm going to pop across to my other server now. Okay, so here on my other server, let's go and have a look at the sleep settings here. Basically, I have it every day, sleep between 1 AM and 7 AM. Now, because the plugin doesn't actually wake up the server, my server will just go to sleep between these times until I wake it up later on when I want to use it. The only trigger I have is the plugin has to wait for my NVIDIA Shield to be off before it sets the server to sleep. Now you can see I've got a custom command here. Now this sends a curl command to actually a Tasmota smart plug that's connected to my desk. It's got various peripherals on the desk like obviously the monitor, keyboard, various other things, USB hub. So what it will do is when the server actually goes to sleep, before it does it will switch the smart plug off, saving me a bit of electricity in case I've forgotten to turn everything off. But other than that, I keep it pretty simple, but I find it extremely useful. Now I just want to go back and mention again about the G option here for the Wake on LAN. Now although you can actually set it here to actually change the network adapter to be in that state, I find it doesn't work on every server. So what I want to do is I want to go to settings here, and I'm going to go to my network settings, and I can see here my default interface is ETH0. Now I'm going to open up a terminal window now, and I'm going to type a command, ethtool space and then ETH0, which is my primary network adapter. So if I hit enter here, we can see some things about the network adapter. Now the important things for us is the type of wake on that the network card supports and which type it's actually set to. So here for my network card you can see wake on, the types that it supports is PUMBG. And each one of these letters represents a different way that the network card would be able to wake the server from sleep. Now for us to be able to use Wake on LAN, the G is the important one. G means magic packet, and magic packet is basically a type of network packet that's used for Wake on LAN, and it contains the unique MAC address of the network adapter repeated several times within the packet's payload. And the NIC listens for this, containing its MAC address, and it wakes up the system when it receives it. Now you can see that my network adapter supports some other ways of waking up the server. We're not really interested in these, but for those of you who are interested to know what these letters actually stand for, well, P means physical activity. That would probably be something like if you plugged a network cable into the NIC, that could wake it up, as that would be changing the network link state. And U stands for unicast message, and these are messages sent from one device specifically to another device, and are actually the most common form of data transmission on the network. And so if the network card was set to U, it would basically wake up whenever it receives a message that's sent directly to itself. Now whilst this sounds similar to a magic packet, it will actually wake the server with any network traffic designed to go to it, such as another PC on the network trying to access a network share. That would probably wake it up as well. The only problem is you can get unintended wake ups, and the server can wake up sometimes when it shouldn't. So next, M stands for multicast messages. Now these are messages that are sent not to one individual device but to a group of devices, and the network adapter will wake up when it receives one of these messages, which is addressed to a multicast group that it's a member of. Next, B stands for broadcast messages. Now these are messages that are sent to all of the devices on the network, and when the network adapter receives one of these it will wake up the system. Now this isn't so secure and you can get a lot of unintended wake ups. Okay, so that brings us back to G, which is the regular Wake on LAN packet. And so now you can see why these packets are the best way to wake up the server, because they're more secure and you don't get any unintended wake ups. But obviously the other modes, they have their uses as well. And if you guys use any of these other modes, then please tell us how you use them in the comments below. But really you need to just check that your network adapter actually supports the G mode, and it also should be in the G mode as well. Now let's go across to this other server here. So on this server here, if I go to settings, network settings, Again, my network card is eth80. So on this server I'm going to run the same command, ethtool, and then the interface name, which for me is eth80. Now at the bottom here we can see it supports Wake on LAN, but the Wake on LAN is set to D, which means disabled. Now going across here to my sleep settings. So what this is for here is to set the network adapter before it actually goes to sleep when you use this plugin to sleep the server. So here, before my server goes to sleep, this plugin should set it into the G state. But I found this doesn't always work. For instance, if I actually click on the button to manually sleep the server now, the server's now asleep, and I'm going to go across and press the power button to wake it up. So the server's now awake again. So now theoretically, if I run the same command again, then I should see it in G, but I don't. So what we can do in this situation is we can manually set it ourselves. And so to do that, we use the same command. We use ethtool, but this time -s, then the network adapter, eth80 for me, then wall space G. So doing this should set it to be able to accept magic packets. So I'm going to hit enter, and now let's have a look and see if that's corrected it. And now we can see that it's enabled and can accept magic packets. So a good idea to do when you've got this situation is take that command, go to settings, making sure you've got the user script plugin installed, add a new script, I'm going to call it set wall, and then edit the script, put the command in, save the changes. Now I'm going to set that to start at the startup of the array, so every time now my server starts, it should set the network adapter to the correct state. Okay, so we've got our server now, so it can accept magic packets and it can be woken up after sleeping. And now we need to learn how to wake up the server when it's sleeping without having to walk into the room and physically press the power button. So to wake up your server using Wake on LAN, there are various apps you can get for your phone that will do the job, and there's apps for Windows and Mac OS as well. But also we can do it from one Unraid server to another. But first we need to install an app, which obviously is called Wake on LAN. Now be sure to install the Wake on LAN plugin, not the virtual Wake on LAN. So click install to install that. And with this installed, we can now go ahead to the command line and we can use the ethwake tool, where we just type ethwake and then the MAC address of the device that we want to wake up. Now this isn't my real MAC address, it's just one I made up, but here you'd put the MAC address of your server. So obviously, if you wanted to, you can make a user script with various servers that you want to wake up. Now I'm going to go across to one of my servers here, and I'm going to put this one to sleep, and also let's put my main server to sleep. And now what I'm going to show you is at the top here, you can see I've got some custom tabs, but what I've done is I've integrated into these custom tabs that when I click onto this server here, base star, it will actually send a magic packet to wake up that server and then go straight to its GUI. So it's woken up the server straight away, and here I can go back to the server I was on, and again here's the other server, I can click onto that, and now this server's awake too. Now how to do this is coming in the upcoming video at the end of this week, so you have to wait till then. Now you may be wondering just what the point is of being able to wake up another server from the GUI of a different server running. Well, I run this server here that's on 24/7. It's a very lightweight server, this one. It's got the Intel M100 CPU, and when running this server uses about 12 watts. Now it runs my reverse proxy, a Bitwarden container, and a Jellyfin container here that serves up the last 6 months worth of the media that I have, with my main server running the main media server with far more than that. But also it runs my Home Assistant and the firewall for the house in a pfSense VM. So this obviously needs to be on all the time, so having it all built into an Unraid server that draws 12 watts seemed a really smart idea. As well, this server's only got one hard drive, a 4TB NVMe, and of course there's going to be an upcoming video about how I set all of this up. So I find it super useful myself to be able to have the more power hungry servers in a sleep state, and to be able to easily wake them just from the GUI of this small server. In fact, recently I was overseas visiting the Nextcloud team. Again, there's an upcoming video on the Uncast show where I interview Yosh, the co-founder of Nextcloud. Keep an eye out for that. And on my way home, due to various cancelled and delayed flights, I spent quite a bit of time sitting on these super uncomfortable seats here. I don't think I've ever sat on anything more uncomfortable. I think it's designed to make you not stay there. And whilst away, I'd heard about this cool Linux distro called NixOS, and I thought, well, I'm going to try and install it whilst I'm in the airport. I've got nothing to do. The seats are uncomfy. It will take my mind off it. I actually recorded this whilst I was in the airport. I opened VPN into my network, and then I connected to the mini server, and from there I started up using the Wake on LAN scripts, my VM server which was sleeping, and then that gave me something to do, installing the distro and checking it out whilst I was delayed in the airport. Now I'm sure you don't want to hear about my cancelled flights and boring delays. Let's move on and talk about another way we can actually make the server sleep and wake using something called RTC Wake. Now I think this is really useful myself. And yeah, I know it will scare some people off, me opening up this terminal window here, because it is actually a command that we're going to use. But don't worry, I'm going to show you a super useful script that will make this all really easy. So all you do is type RTC Wake and a space and -m, which is the mode for the sleep. So I'm going to put space and mem, which is S3 sleep, and then a space, then -s, and that's how many seconds we want it to sleep. I'm going to, for this demonstration, just put 20 seconds here, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so it says when it's going to actually wake up, and we can see the server's asleep here. Clicking on these buttons, it's not doing anything because the server's sleeping. So you don't have to watch, I'll skip through to 20 seconds later, and now the server's woken itself up. Now it's pretty cool to be able to put in a command for it to sleep for a certain amount of time, but seriously, if I wanted the server to wake up at say 7:30 AM tomorrow, well, I can't work that out how many seconds in the future that is. But don't worry, I've got you covered. I've made a script that will do exactly that for you. You put in the time the server wants to wake up in the script, and when the script runs, it will calculate the amount of seconds, run the command, and wake the server up at the specified time. So to get the script, head on over to my GitHub page, click onto repositories and look for server wake up scheduler. Click onto that, have a read through the readme, then click on wake up server here and click on copy raw file. And let's go to the server page, go to settings. Now obviously we need the user script plugin to be installed, so make sure that's installed. And I'm going to add a new script. I'm just going to call it wake up. Click onto the cog, click edit, get rid of the bin bash, and then paste in the script. And then here where it says time, this is where we put in the time that we want our server to wake up. It has to be in 24-hour format and only hours and minutes. So at the moment here it's 11:01, so I'm going to put 23:03 and it's going to wake up the server at 23:03 just so we can test it. I'm going to click save and I'm going to run this in the background. And everything's frozen at the moment, basically because the server's asleep. So I'm going to pause the video and come back in a moment. Okay, so the server's woken back up, and if I click on the log here of the script, then we can see here what the script did and when it woke up. Now, one thing to be careful of, make sure you come across the time and date, make sure your time zone's correct and your Unraid server's time is what you think it should be. If it isn't, then it's going to wake up at a funny time. Okay guys, so that wraps up the video for today. So look out for my video regarding running scripts from custom tabs. That should be out in a few days or next week sometime. But if you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now I want to give a really big thank you to all of my patrons and supporters out there. Thank you so much guys for all your support. I really wouldn't be able to do these videos if it wasn't for your support. And if you want to join these great bunch of people, then please find the links in the description below. Anyway guys, it's time for me to go now, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.